welcome back to I'm Refocused Radio. We are here once again. We have a special guest, Mark Dolfini. He knows a lot of things, and I can't wait to get his life story because not only did he serve, he is a U.S. Marine veteran. He is also a 4-time best-selling author and creator of the V.I.P.E.R framework that we're going to learn more into the show. Mark, he is going to help you, and he helps a lot of Christian entrepreneurs to step outside of that process of burnout, because we've all been there. We know it feels like it's an ugly thing, but it's better when you get on the other side. So we're going to learn not just about his backstory, but how we can all get into alignment with faith, family, and purpose. So without further ado, I want to welcome Mark to the show and say, how you doing, man?
Man, are you available to introduce me anywhere else?
Maybe I might arrange that.
Maybe when I come home,
to you. You can just play like a little mixtape.
I need that. When I come home at night, I want that played in advance to my family, just so they know.
You might start something new, because how boxers have their theme music. You can have your little theme intro.
That is amazing. Thank you so much. I'm humbled by that, and I love the fact that you mentioned how big a deal faith is in this. Whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're in business, whether you're pursuing a different career, when things aren't right at home, when things aren't right in your life and your faith, just nothing else is right. It just doesn't. It just doesn't match up. So thank you for pointing that out in the intro.
I appreciate you pointing that out, because people know. I say the feeling, energy doesn't lie, and when things are flowing, it's not something you can practice. It's like a red light. You either stop or you running it. So right. you know how it goes, because you just know the feeling behind it. So I appreciate you sharing those thoughts with us like that, because that just means you're keeping it real. So let's get to my first question. You've been open about burnout and breakdown in your own personal life. What was the turning point for you when everything started to change for the better?
It was back in 2007. I had, up to that point, I was working maybe 60, 70 hours a week in a real estate business that I had created pretty much out of thin air, and had leveraged everything I could to build up this real estate portfolio. I was working a full-time job, building this stuff up on the side. And at that point in time, I had gone out on my own. And then 2008 came along and shook up the snow globe pretty hard. And on that, up to that point, I had built a pretty decent little business. I mean, it was at about $6.5 million worth of real estate, was bringing in about $60,000 a month in revenues. And I mean, it was fully leveraged, so I wasn't rolling in it, but I was doing okay. And in the course of about 8 months, that $6.5 million portfolio turned into about $1.5 million. And it was devastating. As I looked around, and everything that I had built in the previous 10 years was just almost all of it was gone. And that's incredibly humbling, especially when you set yourself up as this pariah of information, like you've got it all figured out, and you're out there shaking and hustling. And it was hubris for sure. And it humbled me. And it humbled me in the best way. Because in that moment I could figure out, am I going to keep going forward with this, or am I going to go backwards? The real turning point for me wasn't the loss of the real estate, but it was the fact that I turned up, and let's face it, most business owners, they have this double-edged sword where they're really smart and they have a really good work ethic. The problem is that they're really smart and they have a really good work ethic. So they think that every problem that comes to them is their problem to solve. And because they have a good work ethic, they just keep working through it. So that's what I did. And I continued working, 16, 17, 18, sometimes 20 hours a day, grabbing a nap here or there in my truck Sometimes I would sleep at a rental, trying to get it turned over for the next person just because I couldn't afford to hire anybody. And I got a cold. And I never really do the right thing. I mean, just, I was like, okay, well, I'll go to the doctor. I never go to the doctor. Never, I never did that. Went to the doctor. Doctor said, sure, take this medicine and go get some rest. So I took the medicine, went back to work. It wasn't long because my body was so run down that this simple cold turned into double pneumonia. And the only way I could breathe was to put pressure on my chest and lean over the back of a chair. Of course, at this time, I didn't know it was double pneumonia. I just knew something was wrong. And they brought me, I went to the hospital, went back to the hospital and walked in and they said, hey, you are, we're going to put you in this triage room, figure out what's going on. And as they laid me down, things started to get bad pretty quick and they left me alone. And I remember laying on this gurney and I was getting tingling in my hands and feet and I started mouthing for air like a fish out of water. And the edges around my vision turned into a tiny pinpoint of light way off into the distance. And I remember being surprised at how calm I was with all this going on. And it was in that moment, I was like, holy crap, I'm going to die. I've literally almost worked myself to death. And so closed my eyes, thought it was going to be the last time I was going to see this side of heaven. And people woke me up, got a mask fit over my face, and then they admitted me to the hospital. When I realized what was going on, they had, got me some breathing treatments, and I thought I was, getting ready to go back home. And the real turning point was what I'm about to tell you now. I was laying in bed, and I was feeling a lot better. This woman had walked in, and she told me that she was a hospitalist, and I didn't know what that meant, but basically it's the doctor who's kind of the liaison between your care and, what's going on, basically, what the treatment plan is. She had shoulder length, dark hair. She had a doctor's coat on and a stethoscope around her neck. She came in and she put her hands in the front pockets of her coat and she said, if you think that you're going to check yourself out of here and leave, you're horribly mistaken. You're going to be right back here if you make it, if you survive. And she says, just as she turned to leave, she turned it back and she says, people who look like you at your age don't lay in hospital beds like this. You need to get a real look at what's going on in your life. And with that, she left. And it was in that moment that I realized something had to change significantly the way I was doing my business. And it did. And if it wasn't for that woman, I don't know that I would be here to tell you that story.
Wow. When you said that, if you wanted to use her like a symbol, it's like life sometimes flash these warnings. At some point, you're going to have to understand the impact of that warning if you ignore it even further. So my follow-up question would be is, I understand what she said. What was your next move?
Well, I would love to say it was cupcakes and sunshine after that.
But the reality,
it was not a hallmark moment, for sure, but it was a turning point for sure, most certainly.
it makes you think.
It really did. Yeah. And I can't say that everything there, and I mean, I just started taking stock of what was going on in my life, and I started realizing that I couldn't do all this by myself, and again, that's where I started to realize that I really did need help. And not just help from the outside in where I was like needing information that I didn't have. It wasn't about that. It was, I had to let go of certain things that were these low dollar activities that I was holding on to just because I was a control enthusiast. And that was a problem. So I had to start to learn how to be a boss. I learned that I had to learn how to put systems in place. And people talk about systems, from a business perspective, how important systems are. But systems are necessary, and they're really important, especially for a business that needs to scale or is ready to scale. But systems are only part of the process. Systems are only one half of the equation. The other half of the equation is the psychology, is the social aspect, is the human aspect, is the leadership aspect. And I needed to learn both. The systems were massively missing in my business. And once I got the systems in place, then I needed to learn how to be a leader, and not just a boss, but truly be a leader. And not and even that side I struggled, because once I started bringing people in, they started walking all over me, and I'm a nice guy. I don't like being a jerk. But then they forced me to being a jerk, and I don't like being that. That wasn't natural for me. And that was the problem, is that I had too much caring and not enough candor. I had, and as a result, people walked all over me. So I had to learn to have equal parts of caring and honesty with these people, to say, hey, look, I care about you, but I am going to hold you accountable. And that journey of going down that path of learning both of these things, I'm just blessed now that I learn those things and I get to teach those things to other people, because I don't want anyone going through what I did. Literally almost losing my life because I was almost worked myself to death.
Once again, this is Refocused Radio, watching us online, talking to our guest, Mark Dolfini. Next thing I want to ask you about is kind of digging deeper into that, what you just kind of share with us, is when you think about entrepreneurs today who are caught up in just being busybody, just swamped, always will be swamped. I keep looking at my calendar, it says I'm swamped. When you look at what was your personal first steps to gain more clarity and how you had to prioritize your time and what you commit to, plus growing as a leader, what are some of the things that you can share with them that helped you in that beginning process?
Yeah, that's an amazing first question. I would love to say that this was my first step, but it wasn't. Had I looked back and done it a little differently, I would have looked first and foremost at my personal vision. And it reminds me right away of the author Jim Collins, who wrote Good to Great, Great by Choice, Built to Last, all of these different books about business. And he was quoted as saying that when you have too many priorities, it has the same impact as having no priorities. So for those of you out there that have that to-do list of 71 to-do items, right? And if I had 3 hands, I'd put them all up right now, because that was me. So yeah, no, feeling convicted, right, Shemaiah? So it's okay that happens, because we want things, like sometimes it's just about, getting to that next level, even if it's not about the money. For many of them, it's not about the money. It's about the achievement. The problem is where you start confusing fulfillment for achievement, or I should say that backwards, or say that the other way, where you're confusing achievement for fulfillment, because you don't necessarily get fulfillment from achievement. And so how do you do that? First and foremost, I think you formulate a personal vision, and that has absolutely nothing to do with a business vision. Many people that I talk to, I ask them, tell me what it is you're trying to accomplish. And they'll answer me in a business context, which is understandable, because I'm a strategist. They think that that's all I deal with. But when I ask them and say, okay, that's great. So you want to sell 100,000 more widgets, you want to get, 1,000 more clients, whatever the thing is, but for what? What's the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow on the other side? And when they start to answer that question, and usually I may have to ask 3 and 4 times deep until where they get to that choked up, visceral answer that really matters to them. Now I know that I'm getting close. Not there yet, but I'm getting close. And I ask them questions like, what does success mean to them? And it doesn't have a dollar sign attached to that, but it has something to do with that they are so excited to get up and do the thing that they want to do the next day, that they cannot wait to go to bed so they get to get up the next day and do it again. That to me is success. And that to me is a personal vision. And the danger in creating a business vision without creating a personal vision is that you end up creating a life that exists to serve the business. And when you do that, I'm just telling you, like, that life sucks. I've been there. And many people that I end up working with, they go down that same path too. And usually when they're coming to me, they're so emotionally compromised. They're just ready to cash in their chips. I'm like, man, like, you know, there's got to be something better. And they just keep having this series of Wednesdays over and over and over again. And they're living the same Wednesday for the rest of their life. And nothing's ever going to be different because they don't have a personal vision that they're actually working towards. The business vision exists to serve the personal vision, not the other way around.
It's really good because when you think about a car, for example, it looks great on the outside. It might be a nice, 2025, such and such. Maybe has some nice rims. Everything looks good, the paint. But soon as day one passes, is month 33. That car doesn't look the same versus when it was brand new. But also, there's some things going on the inside. And we neglect maintenance. It's not going to run.
That's right.
Forget not run as good. Eventually, it's just not going to run.
Right. That's right.
When you look at how you had to grow personally, do you believe that opened up new doors in your business to walk through later?
Yeah, no question about it. I think part of the reason why that also happened, though, is I leaned into a lot of other things at the same time. I surely leaned more into my faith. I can't say right away. Had I leaned in earlier, it would have massively sped things up for me. Recognizing that I needed something more than me, and my relationship with God certainly changed things. Recognizing too that I needed better tools in my toolbox, and I started learning how to read. First thing I do is I learned how to speed read, and I have this wonderfully beautiful ADHD brain that can't focus on something for more than 5 minutes, or I massively focus on it for 20 hours. It's one way or the other. And but I learned how my brain works, and I learned to operate within a construct that works well for me. And a lot of people I hear is like, oh, I can't read. I've got, ADHD, or I'm too distracted, this and that. I'm sorry, like you can learn that, or find the way that works for you. I found that what I learned is I can't learn from something on a screen. Like, it's very difficult for me to learn something. Like, if I'm watching a video, that's fine. But if I'm trying to read something off a screen, I have to print it off because I learned that I'm a kinesthetic learner. So I started buying books, like the physical copies of the books. And then when I learned how to speed read, I took this course by Jim Quick. That's his real name, Kwik. It's a couple $100, best $200 I've ever spent. And I don't get anything for recommending the guy. The guy does not know me, but best $200 I ever spent because it taught me how my brain can operate. And I started reading it like they have you do this horrible test in the beginning, which is, to test your base reading function. And it was like 120 words a minute, which was like abysmally slow. And by the time I got to the end of this 21-day course, it took me like, a month and a half to do it. But by the time I got to the end of it, I was reading over 600 words a minute, and my retention went through the roof. So I put tools in my toolbox that would help me learn to learn. And once I did that, like literally everything was on the table, from lead generation and marketing and networking to selling better and selling in a way that didn't involve holding people's heads underwater, and learning operations and fulfillment, and learning about the accounting function and finance functions and all these different aspects of business that I needed to learn. And then from the leadership perspective of all those tools that I needed to put in my toolbox around how to understand and create trust with people and to communicate with people more effectively, and the effective use of story. All of those things were massively critical. Each one of those things was just another piece of sand on the scale that started to tip eventually towards success, where now I have an amazing relationship with my God. I have an amazing relationship with my gal. We have a 19-year-old, a 17-year-old, and a 2-year-old. And all of those kids, I mean, and I'm 52, and I didn't really do the math on having a 2-year-old at 52, but all right, there it is. But we were intentional about wanting to expand our family. And all of those things really, even about putting tools in my toolbox to have an effective marriage. And, even people, that's another thing is, people, they want success, they want successful marriage. And I'm like, they ask me, how did I end up having such a successful marriage? I'm like, I study, I learned, I read, I try things, like we do a lot of effort, to be it's not natural to be a good husband and good wife sometimes. Sometimes you need a little bit of training, and that's okay. But when you're falling short, be willing to lean in. And I think that was one of the best things that I ever did in getting really intentional about learning to be successful. So that really made a big difference for me.
Once again, listen to Refocused Radio and watching us online. Go to refocusedradio.com. Catch this episode with our guest today, Mark Dolfini. You have a framework I want to talk about, and that's V.I.P.E.R framework. This helps business owners not just align their faith, but also family and professional work. Kind of unpack for our audience, what is this V.I.P.E.R framework?
So V.I.P.E.R is a methodology that I eventually came up with when I have a real estate, I've been in several businesses. I have a real estate business, I have a property management business, and on the other side of that business, my first book was called The Time Wealthy Investor. And in that book, I laid out what's called the V.I.P.E method. And V.I.P.E stood for Vision, Infrastructure, and Process. And eventually I went on and started working with small business owners and niched up a little bit, which the V.I.P.E method evolved into V.I.P.E.R, which is Vision, Infrastructure, Process, Execution, and Reporting. So the short version of this, and it's pretty comprehensive, but the first part of the V we already talked about, which is personal vision and business vision. And when you're thinking about your personal vision, again, it's like, what's the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow for you? Again, that's the main circuit breaker that all decisions should be made by, right? That's the guiding light. So when you're coming up with the business vision is defined by 3 C's, which is core purpose, specifically what the business is in. What is the business in, and what problems does it solve? That's the core purpose. The second C is core values. And that is, what does the business stand for? Like, how would the world be worse off if you were no longer in business? And that's a really important thing. And because our business core values and our businesses are just an extension of us, that's why the business core values have to be in alignment with your personal core values. Because you can get into a business that doesn't align with your core values, and then you want to talk about a soul suck, that will do it. So if you've ever worked for an employer that didn't align with your core values, you know what I'm talking about. So that core value piece is really important to define, and how you want to do business. Like, what's important to you, and how would the world be worse off if you were no longer in business? So that we talked about core purpose, specifically what business you're in. Core values, what's important to you about this business, and how would it be worse off if you were no longer in business? And finally is the client avatar. Who specifically do you want to work with? And be really specific and define them geographically, where they are, demographically, who they are, and psychographically, how they think. What are their attitudes? What are their lifestyles? What are their interests? What are their goals? And when you can answer those questions, you can really have a business that is much more directed towards the people that you want to work with, and they're much easier to find because they're much easier to market to. So that's the business vision, right? So that's vision. The next piece is infrastructure. So we're talking about the V.I.P.E.R method. The next piece is infrastructure, and that's just the bones of the business. It's the desks, the chairs, the software, the websites, payment processing systems, things like that. And it's kind of the boring piece, but everybody tries to beef it up with process. They try to like put processes in place before they have infrastructure. And it's the cart before the horse. So the reason you have to have infrastructure after vision is because if, let's say for argument's sake, you're wanting to, Shemaiah, you want to lay on the beach for 2 months out of the year in Spain drinking sangria, right? That's going to, and if your infrastructure requires you to return emails and phone calls in a timely manner, that's not going to be a great experience for you when you're trying to lay on the beach for 2 months out of the year, right? So, what's that?
It'll be a fire.
Right. That's right. Yeah. So you're there trying to rub cocoa butter on your belly, and that's going to be horrible, right? Like, man, I got to wipe my hands off. So this is why the infrastructure comes after vision. And then you got process. And process has also two components. There's a tactical day-to-day component, which is the normal, how do you process checks? How do you answer the phone? What's your opening procedures? What's your closing procedures? Just your day-to-day boring stuff that just needs to be documented in terms of how you do things. And then on the other side of the tactical is the strategic. Is you've built this warship. Now where are you going to take it? You built this battleship. You want to take it out of the harbor. What direction are you taking this business? And that involves people, it involves process, and it involves promotion, right? So, or people, purpose, and promotion. People, who you're going to need, the purpose of the strategic plan, like what are you trying to do? Like you're trying to go into a new market, release a new product, whatever it is. And then the promotion piece. The promotion piece is absolutely critical. It's letting the world know what you're planning on doing, okay? And that's the process portion, right? So we talk about vision, we talk about infrastructure, we talk about process. The last two pieces are execution and reporting. Execution has to be defined and I like defining it with either a daily 3 or a daily 5. No more than 5 specific needle moving activities that you're going to do that's going to drive you toward your strategic plan. Because if you're not really clear about what you're going to execute on, you will wander. You will get into work and you will just do whatever you feel like doing that particular day, whatever shows up on your desk. And that's not being strategic. That's being reactive. So you have to be really clear. And again, this is why I mentioned earlier that when you have too many things on your to-do list, right? You have too many priorities. It has the same impact as having no priorities. So that's why you have, for me, the sweet spot number is 3. If I have 3 things that I know that I'm going to do that day that are going to be needle moving activities towards my strategic plan and towards my business vision, I know I'm doing the right things. Like, for example, this right here today was a needle moving activity for me. So thank you. I appreciate you doing this for me. And
appreciate you.
And so thank you. And then the last piece is the reporting function. And the reporting function is basically 2 very simple things. It's tracking lead metrics and tracking lag metrics. Your lead metrics are your activities and your actions. So when you're tracking your activities and your actions, it's all the stuff that you are doing in your daily 5. So you're just tracking those things, just making sure I'm putting my reps in, I did my 20 items this week, great. Okay, I'm scored 100, right? Or I didn't do so well, I need to execute better. Okay, great. But then you have lag metrics, and the lag metrics are basically the results of the lead metrics. Those are your activities. Those are your points on the board. You might have moved 100 yards, or you might have moved 99 yards, but it won't matter because you're not getting points on the board. So the lag metrics are the results of the activities. It's the sales. It's the booked calls. It's the things that you don't have direct control over. You may have indirect control over them based on your actions, but you don't have direct control over. So that's the entire V.I.P.E.R method in a nutshell. And all of those things serve 4 core functions of business, which are lead generation, sales, operations, and accounting. And the customer's journey happens in that order. And then when you use the V.I.P.E.R framework over those 4 core functions, then everything just becomes so much easier, because then you can just say, okay, do I need help with lead generation? Most businesses that are trying to grow generally do. And then, then you can just start working on your lead generation, your sales functions, your operational functions, or your accounting functions using the V.I.P.E.R method.
It's really good. That's really good. You're gonna have to you watching listeners, you're gonna have to replay that back just to get even more deeper into it for it to actually marinate, because one time it's not gonna be enough. This is something you're gonna have to like do your daily reps in. So
Yeah.
uh
Yeah.
I like the way you broke that down, because it's easier to just kind of go with the flow.
Yeah.
Just be real. But one thing I want to add to the tool part that you said is that when you are not operating with the right tools, then you become stagnant. And that leads to my next question. When people face identity crisis, that also in ways misleads them to using tools that will not get them to where they could be. What's your take on that?
So earlier on, I mentioned the importance of core values, and when people generally they go into this exercise, I'm going to answer this in kind of a backwards way. So I think when people get lost is when they lose their values. They're not really sure what it is that they stand for, and as a result, they end up signing up for things that they're really not, like, how do we get here? Sort of question. And most times when I'm asking people about their core values or their business, it's the first time they've really been asked to define their core values ever in their life. And I've seen lots of different approaches where people say, oh, like they'll Google a list of core values and it's like, well, circle the top 20 that make the most sense for you. And then take that 20 and boil it down to 10, and then take that 10 and boil it down to 3, and those are your core values. I look at it a little bit differently. I think when people have enough life experience, it's really helpful. So you have to have some age on you. You have to have a little bit of age on you. Generally in your mid-20s, you start to recognize what your core values are, because you've experienced loss. You've experienced maybe a little betrayal, maybe a little bit of hurt, but you've also experienced some amazing things in your life. And it's those extremes which are going to reveal your core values. Because let's say that if you've ever had a friend that wandered off the reservation, and we've all had that happen, and you're like, oh my gosh, dude, you're heading down a path I can't follow. And when a value is so strong that you're going to act on that value, I would argue that's a core value. And that is something to be don't hide from it, but categorize it. Call it something. You're like, no, you're being dishonest, or you're being out of integrity, or you're something. Whatever that thing is, whatever the violation is representation of your core value. Maybe that was a bad relationship you had. Maybe it was whatever it was, right? Some sort of injustice. And that you're like, no, I can't just sit here. I have to do something in my soul. Yeah. But also, so that's the benefit of the negative stuff. But there's also some amazing events in your life that you would just love to relive if you could. And that also represents core values. So these are the sorts of things that I really would implore people to start literally taking out a piece of paper or putting it on their phone and just saying, no, these are my 5 to 7 real true core values that I am going to act upon, because these are so central and core to who I am. Now, why am I making such a big deal about core values? Because when your core values are really, really clear, all of the decisions start to become much, much easier. And you're going to need it anyway for those to be clear, so you can define them in your business core values. And when you start hiring people, you're going to be hiring people that are in alignment with your core values, right? And you're going to be bringing other tools and techniques and things into your business that are in alignment with your core values. And I think when you get really clear about those things and you define them, and then, by the way, I like 5 always seems to be the magic number for me whenever I'm working with a client to delineate what their core values are for their business. Well, guess what? One of those core values can be visited every day in a meeting. So it's constant repetition. and constant bringing up, and now you're starting to develop a culture. And for businesses that are looking for a competitive advantage, that's the secret sauce, because it's in your people where your competitive advantage is always going to lie. It's not in the clever use of an AI tool. It's not in the clever tactical tool that shows up, because let's face it, technology, a benefit to everyone is a benefit to no one. Technology is going to come and go. Technology is always going to evolve, but it's your people. It's your culture that's going to make you have the competitive advantage than the guy next door who does the same exact thing as you.
And when you finally understand that part, it ties up when I asked about the part of identity, because at this point, you're not willing to sacrifice what you truly believe. And what I mean by that is, if you're on the boat, you're not just going to jump off that boat because there's some new opportunity or whatever. You
Right.
stay, because now it became something of value. So your core is now almost like your guide, like a lighthouse.
Yeah.
Whenever you start to deviate, that core brings you back home, so to speak, because that's where you can have real impact. That's like your starting point, versus you just all over the place and you just do whatever feels right. Well, that makes sense that nothing's going to flow, because you're not even on the map. You're just kind of like,
That's right.
I'm going anywhere I want because I can do anything at any time. Well, isn't that how you started the show with the story of being in the hospital?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was doing. It's exactly what I was doing. I was running all over the place, working 60, 70, 80 hours a week with no end in sight, 7 days a week. And, you know, there was people that really were impacted by the way I was living my life. And I didn't realize it at that time, but there may be people in your own life right now who are suffering because of the way you're living your life and the way that you're running your business. And that's very sobering, because I hear this an awful lot, like, oh, well, I'm doing it for my kids. I'm doing it for them. I'm like, did they sign up for a mother that's never going to be home because of this business? Is that what they signed up for? You know, did they sign up for a dad who is, when he gets home, and he gets home at 7:30, who is so completely and emotionally worn out, and he's grouchy and he's grumpy because he worked all day? Are you giving the best of your family, or are they just getting the rest of what's left over?
That's good.
And it's, listen, I'm not here to preach, man. I get it. It's hard, and it's a paradigm shift for sure. One that, had I not literally stared down the barrel of a hospital bed, I'm not sure that I would have changed it either. You know, I'd have been like, yeah, that sounds great, Mark. You know, let me make my 70 grand a month free cash flow, and then I'll have that better. I'll worry about that better life on the other side.
I'll do better when I get what I actually want. We can talk after I get what I actually think I need.
I'll tithe after I make my first 10 million, right? Yeah, like that. Like,
that's a good point to make, because that's how we all operate. You know,
it's not uncommon. True. Yeah.
And what I mean is, we all are in survival mode in certain parts of our lives, where we're like, I got to work 60 hours. I'm not waiting for the miracle. I got to do what I got to do.
Yep.
But what's also true is that what else has to be sacrificed when you're thinking, this is what I must do?
Yeah.
How much do you believe overthinking plays when it comes to, okay, yeah, maybe in reality is do or die. You need to survive. You need to put food on the table. You have to have a roof over your head.
Yep.
How do you balance that thinking to where, Gotta get back to the core and what I value in life, because long game, that's going to give me more peace than this short term thinking that I just got to do what I got to do to survive.
Yeah. Well, I think you start by starting. And many people ask me this about education. You know, where should I start? You start by starting. Pick up a book that's easy to read. Pick up, do something, right? But in this particular case, you start by starting to craft a personal vision of what you really want your life to be about. And I'm talking about some real honesty about really what you want. And, recently I went back to school recently to pursue my PhD. And many people are like, why? Like, dude, you're in your mid-50s. You don't need that credential. Like, what is it? What's the difference? You've got all these books published. You can, but it's not about the PhD. It's about the goal that I want for me, that I'm like, can I really do this? Am I ready for this next level thing? And I went to my bride and I said to her, hey, sweetheart, this is something that's kind of been on my radar for a really long time. I mean, are you okay with this? She says, we talked through it. We prayed about it. And yeah, and I decided to pull the trigger because it was something that was next for me. Right now, whether I make it through the program or I die trying, I don't know where that'll be, but I'm going out there and I'm gonna make it happen. I'm gonna stretch it. This is the stretch that's worthy of me, but it's in alignment with my personal vision. It's in alignment with my personal vision. And you asked about keeping it in balance. I don't think you ever can have balance. I think balance needs to be removed as a word that needs to be removed from the equation. I do believe you can have harmony. And I think the way that you establish harmony is the best way I can describe this is a conversation that was had. I recently attended the Global Leadership Conference, and wonderful woman. I just want to be this woman's best friend. Her name was Tashonda Duckett, and she is the CEO of TIAA-CREF. I currently am working with a CEO of a software development company who actually worked under this woman, and they affectionately called her T. Duckett. Unbelievable leader, just phenomenal. And she said something that I thought made a lot of sense. And she looked at it from a financial perspective. And she says, if you're looking at your portfolio, right, your investment portfolio, and you have like 90% stocks and 3% bonds and 7% silver and gold, she's like, your portfolio is out of balance. You need to reallocate. And she said, can I say that, like I'm going to give my kids 20% of my energy, and I'm going to be okay with that, because I know that because I've defined that I'm going to give them this time from 6:30 to 8:30 every night, no questions, like with rare exceptions, but I'm going to be honest about that. And then I might need to reallocate from time to time. But if I know that that's what I'm going to do, then there's no discussion and I'm okay with it. And I thought that made so much sense, the way that she goes, and sometimes you need to rebalance your portfolio. Sometimes the business needs more. Sometimes the family needs more, but you rebalance and you reallocate. And I thought that paradigm made so much sense. And I think if people looked at their personal visions that way, not as something that's an afterthought, but everything exists to serve that personal vision, then not in an arrogant, self-serving way, but in a way that's truly authentic to who you are, that you can be truly authentic in using God's gifts that he's given you and be a good steward of the gifts that he's given you, then I think everything else just falls into place. And for me, it certainly has. So I think that's the way to go about it.
That's the key, stewardship, because what I get from that is you have to learn to make necessary adjustments. Like going back to what I said earlier about the car. It looks nice, brand new, it's amazing. But man, when it starts to wear and tear, that's where the real heart shows up. Because are you going to do what's necessary to maintain it, to do the responsibility, to you know how much you value something, but what you're willing to do when it's time to do the difficult decisions. Because if you don't value it at all, you're just going to tear it up. You're not going to have any good stewardship, but you're going to end up paying a hefty price. And someone wise said, you pay the price of discipline now, or you pay the price later.
Yep.
And I think that is the same in anything, not just business. Because, man, I can talk business all the time on this show till I'm done. But one thing I hope people get from these interviews as well is what you talked about. Stewardship. That in itself opens doors. And when you learn how to be a better steward, then that process of you going back to school and get a PhD and all these great things, meeting all these great leaders, I believe that's a direct result in you making those hard choices at the beginning of what will it take for me to be a better steward? When you think from that lens, sky's the limit of what's possible in your future versus the other person who just does whatever he feel like doing or she feel like doing and just roll the dice and hopefully it works out.
Yep. No, and I think when you're looking at it from that angle, it's just so much easier because there's just so much clarity on the other side when, again, you're driven by, you're aligned with core values, you're aligned with your vision around what you really want, and that's where you really need to have that honest conversation with yourself about what you're trying to do. And then when you get other things that, let's face it, other opportunities, because I don't know about you, but every time I get out of the shower, I have like 3 more business ideas and I'm like, oh my gosh, right? What am I going to do? And that's the problem. I mean, it's a beautiful thing for entrepreneurs, but you can't execute on all 92 ideas you have this week, right? And the 92 ideas you have this week, those are the best ideas you've ever had until next week. So that's why it's easy. Sometimes you just have to recognize, like, when you're asking that question of yourself, is this in alignment with my core my core values, and is this in alignment with my personal vision? A lot of times you can say, you know what, it really isn't. It really isn't. This is just something that, or sometimes you just need to get it out of your head, which I carry around a little physical book because I'm a kinesthetic person, where I write it down and go, hey, I'm gonna do this eventually, but not right now. Not right now. And I'm totally okay with it. And sometimes you just need to get it out of your head. And then you look back at that idea that was the most amazing idea you ever had. You look at it, and you're like, oh, that was so 2 weeks ago. I don't want to do that now, right? So sometimes you just got to get the ideas out of your head.
Well, been great discussion talking to our guest today, Mark Dolfini. If people want to go find out more of your resources and what you have to offer, what's the best website that they can stay connected with you?
Please not LinkedIn. I feel like every time I wander on LinkedIn, I feel like I've wandered into a Middle Eastern bazaar, and people are trying to sell me lots of things that I don't need. So I don't need a cashmere blanket or health insurance, but thank you, but no. So please not there. But I am on there, but I don't respond to that. So it's just hard. But you are welcome to show up. If I'm on Facebook, I am on Instagram. But strategicboardroom.com if you'd really like to reach out to me there. Plus, there's a lot of free resources in my resources section. If you'd like to get a copy of my book, you can get that there. And I can sign it for people domestically. I can sign the domestic U.S. I can sign it and get it out to you. So if that's interesting to you, I would be humbled and honored if you read my book and give me some feedback on it. That's I love to write. I think I'm reasonably decent at it, and I think it's going to help a lot of people. So if you'd like to reach out, strategicboardroom.com.
Well, like I always want to say to you, Mark, thank you for your time, man.
Thanks so much.